Showing ID before you vote is no big deal. Everyone has ID, right?
Do you drive a car, Francesca? Do you receive governmental aid? Do you have a job? If you've answered yes to any of these, chances are you have some form of ID. You are required to have an ID to drive a car. You're required to have an ID to receive governmental aid. And jobs require things such as social security numbers and photo IDs, such as licenses. And such, in fact, if your job requires you to travel out of country a lot, they'll require a passport as well.
In case you haven't noticed, the presidential election is almost here.
Yeah, I've received a fuck ton of calls from Trump and Hillary callers making sure they know they don't get my vote.
Soon, everybody can go to the polls and cast their ballots to decide the fate of America. Well, almost everybody.
What are you trying to imply here? Are you trying to say that blacks can't vote, Francesca? Do you really think that, though, through all that digging, you found something that'll stop blacks from voting?
Since 2008, 10 states have successfully implemented strict voter ID laws that are meant to prevent voter fraud, but in reality, make it harder for a lot of people to vote.
Harder because you can't commence fraud now, or harder because you think it's racist? You know what? I don't even know why I'm asking this. I already know you're going to cry wolf on this one, so go on.
3 of them make you show either a photo ID, like a driver's license, or non-photo ID, like a bill with your name on it, before you can vote at the polls. The other 7 will only let you vote if you have a photo ID. So depending on where you live, what you need to do to vote in our national election can be totally different. America! So why have these laws popped up recently?
How so? You've been required to show some form of identification. In fact, even in Mexico, you're required to show ID. Mexico! For fuck's sakes, hardly anyone in the US likes that place anymore, apparently. Even though they're the largest importer of US goods. 3rd largest, to be fucking exact. Also, yeah, theoretically speaking, it's supposed to make it harder to commit fraud. But again, US is not the only country that does this. Many other countries, just like Mexico, have also followed suit with this. But they've been doing it a lot longer than like the past fucking 60 years that we've been doing it.
Well, in theory, they prevent voters from impersonating someone else. That way, we can all feel confident in the accuracy of the election process without worrying that some kid is sneaking into the polls wearing mustache glasses. Yo, 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 fake IDs! Vote twice!
Wow, no wonder MTV hired you. Your comedic skills are through the roof! I mean, holy shit, that was so good! Please don't ever joke again. You know what? Scratch that. Keep joking. Maybe you'll actually get good at it. Oh wait, your entire show is a joke. That cries racism to literally fucking everything. I can't believe that you have actually tried to slander the voter ID registration requirements in the United States as a way to cry racism. I can't even believe that. But then again, you've cried racism on stupider things before, so no surprise here that you would try to say that, oh, well, the elections are rigged because racism against black people.
But here's the thing. The kind of fraud voter ID laws claim to prevent practically never happens. In fact, a report concluded that voter impersonation is rarer than being struck by lightning.
Yeah, here in the US, voter fraud is very rare but that's because we've required some form of identification since the civil rights movement, and even before that. Why is it only millennial blacks that are bitching about the voting processes? I've never once heard anyone before that generation bitch about how the voting laws are hindering them. And yeah, that sounds racist and probably is, but it's the truth, and the truth hurts. It wasn't designed to systematically oppress anyone from voting. In fact, most states weren't affected by it because, again, you need ID for fucking everything. So to sit here and say that this is racism is fucking stupid. Is it racist to deny you alcohol, even though you're 21? But you have no form of identification to prove that you are 21? Is it against, am I being a racist then by denying you cigarettes then? Because you have no form of identification to prove that you are 18. 21 in most states. Do you see how that's a problem? Like, do you see how that's acting childish and baby-like, in fact? Which is why I'm kind of like acting like a child here on this point, because it seems like the only way to get through to people like you is to act just as stupid as you.
Even FoxNews.com reported that this kind of voter fraud rarely happens. Wait, did I just agree with Fox News? Oh my god! So why even bother having voter ID laws at all?
Francesca, seriously, you know why, and you know that it's been ineffective because we've been doing it since the 50s. So why ask this question? Why even make this video in the first place? You're trying to cry wolf so hard that you actually agree with Fox News, which is even rarer than Half-Life 3.
Good old-fashioned voter suppression with a dash of racism and classism for good measure.
No, I will barely let you have the classism thing. But if people are that poor, they have bigger things to worry about than voting, like, oh, I don't know, surviving? And even then, most of them are on welfare or other governmental aid services. There's food stamps, welfare, Medicare. There's programs designed to help druggies get off of their addiction. There's shelters and everything like that out there for people to survive off of until they're back on their feet. Hell, I'll be honest, I'm here on Medicare right now myself due to the fact that I'm working to improve my education. Is there anything wrong with that? No. Sometimes we do need a little bit of help. And the fact that you're sitting here saying that, oh, it's government's fault, when in reality we've given more handouts than anything ever before, which is kind of Republican for me to say. It's kind of fucked up, even though I kind of disagree with every Republican presidential candidate since the history of time. Almost. But still, though, you see the point, that there are governmental aids in place, so many in fact, that there's no reason anybody should sit here and say, well, it's the government trying to, like, oppress us and shit. It's just, you just can't say that.
Requiring voters to have ID seems like a harmless precaution until you realize the majority of people lacking ID are either elderly, poor, and aren't white. And frequently, they're all three. Statistically, African American and Latinx voters are much less likely than white voters to have the qualifying IDs required by states with voter ID laws. They're also disproportionately likely to be low income.
Latinx? What kind of term is that? Hispanic is the term you're looking for. Calling Hispanics Latinx just sounds, oh god, racist! If I'm wrong and it's Latino, it still sounds better than Latinx, right? Because it just sounds like Latinx is like crossing them out or something. It just sounds uncomfortable than Hispanic or Latino. And now for the meat of these arguments here on this section. Blacks are more likely to be poor because they choose the thug life over the civil life. You have more Hispanics and blacks in low-income areas than you do any other race in the country. So if you pick the life of crime, you're not going to have a stable income. Therefore, you're going to be poorer than someone working. You're also going to be less likely to have ID due to the fact that it's easier to finger you. This isn't racism, this is just facts, and sometimes the facts hurt. If you really want to make changes, then give up the guns and gangs outfits for pencils and education. People who have an education are way less likely to be in low-income areas and have crimes. Education is what we need to fix in these areas. If we really want to improve the voter turnouts of black and Hispanics, then we need to improve our educational system. I do believe a presidential candidate called Bernie Sanders was trying to do this for like the longest time ever, but people shoved him out and voted Hillary instead because womanism.
Even when a state offers free photo ID, these residents may not be able to afford the underlying documents, transportation, or time required to get one.
Wait, so your excuse is that places that offer free ID, people can't go, take a bus, or walk, or get the transportation needed to go to a government building in order to get their identification. You're telling me that they can't call up a relative and ask for a lift up to get an ID. How stupid are you? You're literally implying here that something that's designed to help the very problem you have and saying, well, it's not enough. If it's not enough, it just sounds like laziness to me, which I wish I could get an ID for free in my state. For fuck's sakes, it charges you for this kind of shit. And I'm white, so where the fuck is my free white shit? Seriously. I understand if people literally are that fucking broke, but refer to my previous statement, where if you're in a low-income state, you're going to be trying to be focused more on survival than you are about voting. Seriously. If you're really that broke, you would focus more on surviving and getting yourself back up on your feet before you worry about anything to do with politics.
Many Republicans pushing for voter ID claim the laws have nothing to do with race or class. But in 2013, North Carolina County Precinct GOP Chair Don Yelton told The Daily Show that if the state's new voter ID rule hurts a bunch of lazy blacks who just want the government to give them everything, so be it. Tell us how you really feel, Don.
He just did? I mean, bravo on that nitpicking, by the way. You found one racist idiot who has no filter and actually has been shunned and removed because of his comment on the very show you pulled that quote from, but failed to mention that our own society removed him from his position not even a week later after making that comment. Seriously, this nitpicking shit with everyone just needs to stop. Because when you're sitting here nitpicking, it fucks everything up.
And speaking of North Carolina, they passed a law that imposed strict photo ID requirements on voters, in addition to ending voter registration outreach programs that historically increased black voter turnout. Thankfully, this past July, a federal appeals court actually struck down North Carolina's voter ID laws, claiming they targeted African Americans with almost surgical precision.
I still find it hilarious with the ID part, even though every other democratic country does it! Seriously. In the situation with North Carolina, there was a lot more behind it than just the voter ID. You nitpicked here. Again, there was a lot more to it than just what was released. And the fucking document you give of the Washington Post stated that it wasn't just that it was surgically designed to... The voter ID thing wasn't surgically designed to do that. Like, it has its plus. And supposedly this is a downfall. But you nitpicked it and said, no, it's only because of that. There was more to it than that. You just nitpicked one section of it that said that it had a little bit to do with the voter ID. And you pulled that and said, see, to everyone. Oh my God, Francesca. Your nitpicking just needs to stop.
The voter ID laws are a classic example of structural racism, which is what makes racism different from prejudice. Prejudice is the individual dislike of a class of people based on a superficial characteristic or stereotype. Racism is racial prejudice plus structural oppression and power that negatively impacts a group. Structural racism often exists in the form of policies or laws that may or may not seem overtly racist, but ultimately cause negative consequences for people of color.
Bullshit. No law can be passed that discriminates against a group of people. That would diminish the very foundation of our country from the start. Oh, fuck, Francesca. Back in the 50s and 60s, I'm going to give you a history lesson, which I'm sure you're probably going to bring this up too. There was a guy named Martin Luther King Jr. who was fighting hard for this very thing, so you guys could vote properly. But he didn't do it just for blacks, he did it for everyone. He wanted to make sure that you, as a black person, me as a white person, this guy is an Asian person, all these people, it doesn't matter what skin tone or what sex you are, could vote legally and not be systematically quote-unquote oppressed. Back then, that was the thing. Being oppressed was the thing. You know, this was the 50s, and yeah, I would fully stand by this argument saying that there are some laws in place. But ever since that moment, every law to date that has been passed has not been systematically to oppress any group of people whatsoever. You're just making it seem like that it is because you don't agree with that law, because it somehow oppresses you, because who the fuck doesn't have an ID that votes?
Pop quiz! What's the best way to make sure racist laws stay on the books and new rules aren't put into place? Ooh, I know! Make it really difficult for people of color to vote! And that has a long history in America.
You and I can't change laws because we're not senators or congressmen of our respective state or branches. If you really want to change that, then fuck the presidential elections and go vote for someone to replace one of the 88% of senators and Congress officials that are also up for re-election this year. Sanders is trying to get in there, and everyone liked him. That's the only reason I'm going to the polls, honestly, is to get people out of that for other reasons, like the diminishing of the Patriot Act and keeping the internet under neutrality. That's literally the only reason why I'm going, because I mean, if you know anything about net neutrality, it's shit like this that can get posted and uploaded, and no one can discriminate traffic against it. The same case, the Patriot Act. I mean, that law was absolutely fucking crazy. I'll link to both below, so then you guys can give you a little bit of research from reading if you're watching this in the background or something.
After the Civil War, the 15th Amendment was ratified, making it illegal to deny a male citizen the right to vote based on race. But that didn't stop election officials from falsely telling black voters they'd gotten the date wrong or that they were in the wrong polling place. Other voters were told they had to pass a literacy test first. Some were even forced to recite the entire Constitution. Really? Who can do that without Google? Fast forward to the civil rights movement in the 1960s. After the violent attack by state troopers on peaceful activists protesting in Selma, Alabama, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed, which explicitly made voter discrimination illegal. Because of the act, turnout of black voters increased tremendously. Of course, not everyone was happy about this. Some states took issue with Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which required states with a history of voter discrimination to seek federal approval before making changes to voter laws. This was basically the federal government's way of looking at states who've been shady towards voters in the past and letting them know, we see you.
At its core, yes, it's meant to stop states from passing laws that would discriminate against anyone. I don't understand why you added this section in, because it causes the very foundation of your argument to collapse on itself. No law can be passed that will cause unfairness or discrimination in the polls, which is why the ID requirements still exist. It's clear that it's not causing fraud or hurting voter turnouts, so why are you bitching about it? Oh wait, I forgot who I'm speaking to.
But in 2013, in the case of Shelby County versus Holder, lawmakers argued enough time had passed that it was no longer fair to make these states undergo the extra approval, because, racism is over. The Supreme Court agreed. So after Shelby versus Holder, states like Alabama were free to change election laws without approval from the Justice Department, and many of them took advantage of this to create the voter ID laws we see today.
What does Alabama have that other states don't? In fact, they allow more ID types to be allowed in their state. This is just a list of everything that they allow. An Alabama driver's license, Alabama non-driver ID, Alabama photo voter ID, state-issued ID by Alabama or any other state, federal issued ID, U.S. passport, employee ID from federal government, state of Alabama, county government, municipality, board authority, or other entity of the state, student or employee ID from a college or university in the state of Alabama, including postgraduate, technical, or professional schools, student or employee ID issued by a state institution of higher learning in any other state, U.S. military ID, tribal ID. My current state has only this: current photo ID, a copy of current utility bill, a copy of a current U.S. bank statement, a copy of a current government check, paycheck, or other governmental document that shows your name and address. So not even out-of-state college students can vote in my state, which honestly reflects poorly on mine. Best contact my government representative if I don't like how my state's voting laws are handled and request for change instead of bitching about it on YouTube. I mean, I love how you threw Alabama in this because, like I just clearly stated, it doesn't matter if you're in the state of Alabama or out of the state of Alabama, as long as you have a form of identification in Alabama or another state or are a college student, you can still vote. You're in this country, you can still vote. I don't understand why you threw Alabama in this group of bunches. It just caused your argument to collapse on itself once again.
Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who dissented from the decision, said, "Throwing out pre-clearance, when it has worked and is continuing to work to stop discriminatory changes, is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you are not getting wet. And when it comes to racism, it's still raining. A lot."
Yes, it's raining. So hard that you have to nitpick at racist shit or nitpick to make something harmless look like it's racist. Yeah, definitely raining hard here in the U.S. It's just downpouring that racist rain, you know what I'm saying, huh?
So why does all this matter? Well, beyond ensuring every American has the right to vote, the key to ending structural racism is by replacing it with a better structure.
It already has been replaced. Doesn't need to be replaced again. Don't fix what isn't broken, Francesca.
It isn't just about people changing their racist behaviors, although that's certainly part of it. It's also about reassessing the way those behaviors get written into the very laws on which our country stands. And if—
No. Fucking no. You're being a crybaby thinking a voter ID is against people when in reality, it's not. You're making something that's literally fucking harmless seem like it's the biggest fucking problem in the history of ever. Like it's the KKK coming out and saying, "Kill all niggers!" I mean, come on. Let's not be childish here about this part. Because if it has not actually negatively affect voting registration turnouts, because it's been around, as you've stated, since 2011. It hasn't affected it. It hasn't hurt it. It hasn't changed anything. And also, I love how you're trying to say that all this has been going on since 2011, when in reality it's been going on much sooner than that. And it's been around much longer than you think. Even much longer probably than what I think it's been going on for. But I love how people love to cry racism, that the government is racist, when we literally have a black president right now. We've had a black president now for 8 years. And yet people are still trying to claim racism, that the government's racist against them. I can't understand that. I really cannot fathom the reality. Because if we were really that racist, then why do we have a Hispanic Supreme Court judge and a black president? We wouldn't have any of these if we were that racist. I mean, granted, yeah, we're letting in Donald Trump, who is the biggest fucking hypocritical dumbass since fucking everything. The guy who owns Miss America and thinks it's okay to grab women's asses. But even then, and if he becomes president, I'll say, you know what, he doesn't represent me. Same case people said about Obama. Same case people said about Bush. He doesn't represent me, so it doesn't factor me. Don't factor me into his results. Or nothing like that. That's kind of how I feel on it. That's also the same case with me if he gets elected in. I don't like Hillary too much either. The way she's pulled shit in the past just does not sit right with me. But there's also another thing besides the two-party system. It's called a third-party group, like the libertarians and the others and shit like that. I'm not saying that the libertarian choice is the best in the world, but can we just be honest here? Do we really want somebody who, one, jeopardized our national security and deleted 30,000 emails, and has anybody who's also been against him has surprisingly been killed? Or do we want the biggest racist, bigoted, tax-evading dumbass in existence in office? I mean, the lesser of two evils, or the lesser of the stupid. You know? Look at it how you will. Vote wherever you want. Just look it up online on Google. Check out, see where you need to vote, what you need to vote before November 8th, which is national voting for everyone. Here in my state, voting is already pretty much done. We were able to vote early, so if you're in my state, which I'm sure you know what it is by now, assuming that if you've actually catched on to the hints I've been giving, then, well, hopefully your candidate wins. I don't give a shit, honestly. I'm not voting for president. I'm voting for people who actually matter. I'm not voting for some fucking figurehead. I'm voting for Congress and senators who are representing me in my country and are actually able to pass and deny laws that actually fucking matter, instead of some president who claims to do all this kind of shit but doesn't actually do it. Not saying any president before in the history of ever has ever done that, but Bush, Bush. That's all I'm going to say. Have a good one, everybody. I'll see you next time.